Welcome to Swords and Hammers, where truth comes clothed in tales, and the soul remembers what the mind forgets. Settle in and listen well. The Whittler, a tale of Wendell Hatch and the cedar block. Wendell Hatch sat on his porch with a block of red cedar in one hand and a knife older than most marriages in the other. The bell at the white church on the rise was banging away like a tin pan in a windstorm. Folks walked by in their Sunday clothes, nodded at him polite, and pretended not to notice he wasn't going. He pretended not to notice they were pretending. Everybody, you might say, was getting along. Fine. He shaved a curl off the cedar and watched it fall. Wood don't lie, he told nobody in particular. The grain shows what it shows. He had said that same sentence about preachers, politicians, and his second wife, and it had served him well in all three categories. Wendell had been a church-goer once. He had been, in fact, the kind of man other men nudged when the offering plate came around, on account of his being reliable about it. He had said the amens loud and the prayers louder. He had once wept in the back pew during a hymn about the blood, though he never told anybody. Then time did to his religion what time does to a fence post sunk in damp ground. Nothing dramatic, just a slow leaning, until one morning the whole thing was lying flat in the weeds, and he hadn't even heard it fall. He could put his finger on no scandal. There was no preacher run off with the choir director, no doctrine he had wrestled with and lost. What had happened was smaller and meaner than that. God had simply become a familiar sort of fellow. Wendell had got to where he could pray with one ear listening to himself talk and the other ear figuring what to say next. He had got to where he could say, Almighty, the way a man says Tuesday. And one Sunday he just didn't go, and the sky did not crack, and he took that for proof. He whittled, he drank his coffee, he told himself he was free. A man can tell himself a thing for 40 years if nobody contradicts him. His granddaughter Sari came up the porch steps that morning in shoes too big for her. She was 6½ and carried herself like she was 30 and had seen things. She climbed into the rocker beside him without asking and watched the cedar curls fall for a long minute. Grandpa, she said, make me an angel. Wendell laughed, the dry laugh of a man who has forgotten what angels are for. What kind? He said. Tall and skinny? Short and fat? The kind from the Bible, Sari said. The kind that says, don't be afraid, because everybody is. He stopped his knife. She watched him the way she watched the rooster she didn't trust. Then she said, with no warning at all, Grandpa, when you used to pray over supper, your hands used to shake. How come they don't shake no more? Wendell looked at his hand. It was steady as a stump. I reckon I got used to him, child, he said. Sari considered this with the seriousness only 6-year-olds can manage. I don't think you're supposed to get used to him, Grandpa. Then she climbed down, because she had a frog to find, and left him there. He sat a long time with the knife in his lap. You know this kind of moment. You have had one. Maybe in a kitchen, maybe on a road, maybe in a pew you had only sat in to please your wife. The moment when a small voice says a true thing and the whole inside of you goes quiet because you have nothing to answer with. Wendell went inside. He shut the door of his workroom, which he had not used for anything religious in a decade. He knelt by the bench on knees that cracked like green wood in a fire. He opened his mouth to pray and found that he could not get past the first word. Father, he said, and the word stopped him. He had said that word 10,000 times, the way a man says the name of a town he passes through without stopping. He had not, in years, said it the way a son says it when he has wandered far and come up the road, tired and dirty, and afraid he will not be let in. He had not stopped believing in him. He had just stopped trembling. And a faith that does not tremble is a faith that has no weight. He saw it then, plain as the grain in the cedar. God had not grown small. Wendell had grown blind. The shaking he used to feel was not bondage, it was nearness. He had mistaken its leaving for liberty, the way a man mistakes the going out of a fire for the coming on of summer, until the cold finds him in October without a coat. He stayed on his knees till his legs went useless. He did not say much. Mostly he just listened to the silence, the way a thirsty man listens for a creak. And the silence was not empty. It was full. When he came back out to the porch, Sari was sitting on the steps with a frog in a jar, and one shoe missing. He sat down beside her with the cedar block and the old knife. His hand, when he set it to the wood, was shaking a little. "Grandpa," she said, "your hand's doing it again." "I know it, child," said Wendell. "It's the right kind of shake." He carved her angel slow. He carved it like a man who has remembered what angels are for, which is to stand in the door of a holy place and say, in voices that shake the bones of kings, "Do not be afraid, even though you are, and should be." A god you can pat on the head, he thought, ain't a god. He's a pet. And pets do not save you when the floor caves in. The cedar curls fell on the boards. The church bell on the rise had long since gone quiet. But Wendell Hatch was, for the first time in a long season, sitting on his porch with the right weight in his hands. Wood don't lie. The grain shows. Selah.